another episode of Inside the Recording Studio. I am Jody Whitesides, and with me as always is Mr. Chris Hellstrom. How are you today, Chris?
Doing splendidly, Jody. I'm doing splendidly. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I can't complain.
Yeah?
I had my first mochi nut today.
Good for you.
It's like
I have
a donut
no idea what that is.
It's mixed with the Japanese rice thing called a mochi. I guess it's a new hip thing that a lot of people are doing. It was actually pretty tasty. That's a little side note for today's episode.
There you go. Yeah, my daughter gets some of those like cookie thingies, mochi ice cream, I think, or something. They're kind of weird to me. Hey, to each their own. And speaking of to each their own, we have another listener request this week. Relatively high nerd factor, I would say, on today's episode.
Thank you, Mike Green, for that one.
Yeah, this was so obvious when Mike pointed this out to me. That it's so obvious for guitar players. He was asking, well, how do you really go about listening for the differences between a Strat, a Tele, and a humbucker-equipped guitar?
Right. How do you do that? As a guitar player, I just take it for granted.
Yeah, that was my point. I'm like, yeah, we kind of do that. So if you're a guitar player and you're listening to this, you're probably going, oh, duh, right? But if you're not, we're going to have a bunch of audio examples in here that will shed some light on that and kind of highlight the differences between them. We should do a little bit of housekeeping, talk about how we're doing the comparisons, because this is a really broad subject, right?
It is.
And everything comes down to what kind of pickups are used. So we're gone for as much of a traditional type of a thing as possible. I played through a Tele. You went through your Strat.
Mm-hmm.
That does have Fishman pickups. It's the Strat version of that, so we're just getting less hum, basically. Correct?
Well, it's no hum is what it is.
There you
It's
go.
single coil pickups for Strat voicing with no hum.
We're trying to do as close to apples as we can.
Right.
When we're thinking about single coils, they are notoriously very noisy.
Right.
I suppose depends up to you if you consider that a feature or a bug, but there you go. So we're not going to have any of that. The way we went about this, obviously, we're playing the same thing in all these audio examples.
Yes.
So that we're not fooled by level and things like that, how hot the pickup is going into, these are all done with amp sims. The DI has been normalized to a certain level.
What level did you use, Chris?
Minus 18.
Hey, look at that one.
Right? So they're all going in at minus 18. And then they are also matched at the back end when they're spit out and bounced in place.
To what level did you match that?
I think I did a peak of like minus 6 or something.
Oh.
Just so that we would have a healthy enough level so that they're even. Right?
No
It's
EQ,
not
no
like
compression, just straight guitar into the amp.
Exactly. There's no other processing than the amp sim on any of these. Mm-hmm. The only thing where there is a little bit of processing on after the track here is on example number 3, and you'll see why, where I used a noise gate to just take out some of the nastiness in between. It has no effect on the tone. Everything should be relatively matched in volume. Every example that we're going to hear like a clean example, we're going to hear a little bit of a crunchy example, and a distorted example. Mm-hmm. They're always going to be in the same order. Get your pens and papers ready here. But we're going to start, every example starts with a riff that's going to start with a Strat.
Yep.
It's going to go into a Tele, and then a humbucker type of guitar. If you're playing along at home, the humbucker guitar was played with my Schecter, custom Schecter.
All right.
That is doing that. Full disclosure right there. Every example is going to be in that order. Then we're going to play them, you're going to hear them, and then we're going to talk about what our impressions are through all of those.
Without further ado, let's just jump right into example 1.
This is the clean guitar, and just for disclosure here, these were all done with a Soldano clean channel with an IR that used a Royer 121 as the IR.
Do you know how far away from it and where it was placed on the speaker for that?
Pretty close. I have my usual type of a thing where I'm slightly over from the center and about an inch away.
So you're on the cap edge, about an inch away on the amp.
Correct.
Ah, see, that's important information right there.
Well, there you go.
All right.
All right, Jody. So beautiful arpeggiated guitars right there. And the first thing that we heard was the bridge position of the Strat, the Tele, and the humbucker.
Right.
Impressions. What are you hearing when you're hearing that?
With the Strat guitar, I noticed that it was a very bright sound and a very glassy sound at that. That's my impression of that bridge pickup position with that sound.
Yeah, I agree with that. To me, it's not the strength of a Strat in this kind of thing with that pickup. To me, it's obviously very bright. It's very chimey, almost a little bit piercing.
Yep.
Depends on what kind of track that you're going for. What do you think about the Tele?
The Tele had a lot more mid-range to it, which to some people would say, oh, it feels warmer. The other thing that it didn't have to me in comparison to the Strat, hearing that back-to-back, is a lot less glass to the sound.
The thing that leaps out to me there is it's warmer.
Mm-hmm.
I also felt like the top was getting a little brittle. It wasn't as clear and defined into that. Mm-hmm. And this, as it kind of exposed like this. In a track, it might work, but not as chimey. As far as the humbucker, what are you thinking?
The humbucker, to me, overall, compared to the first two guitars, very dark by comparison. Mm-hmm. That's all I'm going to say about it. It's just darker.
Yeah. To me, it's a little bit more scooped in the mids type of a thing. Mm-hmm. Obviously, a lot more low end than the above examples, the Strat and the Tele. That's my kind of takeaway from that. Let's move on to using middle pickup. Now, a caveat here, because most of you probably know that Strat has a middle pickup. What we've gone for here is to not compare all 5 positions on the pickups of a Strat. When we're saying middle, we're not talking about the middle by itself. We're talking about it in combination with the neck pickup.
Right. So you had me set it to neck and middle, which is generally position 4 on the 5-way switch.
Right. I think that's a lot more of a common position to be in than just the middle. There we go. Let's take a listen for the middle. Takeaways, Jody. What do you got?
With the Strat, compared to the bridge pickup, I thought the low mid has a lot of thunk to it, is what I would call that. And the top was very, very clear to me.
Yeah. To me, this is classic clean tone, right? What I'm thinking about, very, very usable. You hear it in all tracks. When you're doing stuff like this, like arpeggiating stuff, it has that nice chimey thing, but it's not taking your head off. It's probably my favorite thing when it comes to like a clean guitar, that kind of tone. What about the Tele? What are you thinking?
Compared to the previous example where it was set to the bridge, this has less low mids to it and a lot more glassiness to the top. That's how I felt about the Tele in the middle position.
I'm hearing this as also very clear as well. It has less of that brittle top end that we had in the first example around the bridge pickup. And it's a very, very nice tone for me when you're doing like chimey kind of picky kind of stuff. It's a great option. Humbucker, what you got?
I felt like it was very balanced and very round on this particular example. That's all I can say about it.
Very similar to the Tele. It just has a little bit more low end. You're going to hear me say that a few times here when we're talking through these. But it's a nice option when you come into clean stuff with a humbucker. I like this position. Finally, with the clean stuff, we're listening to the neck. Absolutely beautiful, isn't it?
Don't pat yourself too hard on the back there.
Well, Strat options, what are you thinking?
To me, with the neck pickup on this particular setup, very punchy in the low end, very clear, not brittle, but very clear on the top end.
I had just about the same adjectives there. One way I like to describe that. It's very defined. You can hear everything nice and defined, as it were. So that's another great strength of like a Strat to me. What do you think about the Tele?
A very different sound on the Tele to me. It came across sounding very woolly and very muted in the high end, such that it almost felt like I had a blanket on top of this guitar.
It's a good way of saying it. I have my notes here, and I said it starts sounding really muddy now, starting to lose definition with this pickup on a Tele. It doesn't work quite as well for me. Of course, you can find anything to work in any situation. This was not my favorite. What about the humbucker?
I felt like it had a really thick low mid and a very thin top.
Yeah, I'm kind of on board with that. I said comparatively to the Tele, more low end, it still has more definition to me than the Tele had. It's not as defined as a Strat. It's still workable in like clean situations.
All right, set up example number 2.
Number 2, we're getting a little bit crunchier here. The signal chain here was I used Friedman's Dirty Shirley on the high gain input. The IR with this is a combination of an SM57 and Sennheiser MD409. If you're asking me about positions on that, I couldn't tell you because they don't inform me on that.
Stupid plug-in alliance.
Right? But it's a great sounding amp sim, and I think for this situation, it's a good choice where it just starts getting like a little bit crunchier. It's not metal or anything by any definition. It starts getting a little bit more aggressive. So let's take a listen to the bridge pickup on the 3 guitars. Okay, thoughts on the Strat?
Very thin, very crunchy on top. That's how I felt about it.
I'm with you there. It's very cutting in a way. It is very thin, but if you use it as not a main guitar, but it's something that you're layering with, tucking it into the mix a little bit more, it might find a place there. There's a lack of low end in this. What do we think about the Tele then?
Very thick in the gut, a much thicker gut. A very nice, smooth top, comparatively to the Strat anyway.
I hear something that's a little bit warmer. And a word that I wrote down here for this, and this is going to be kind of repeated here throughout a few times. This is a very raunchy kind of a sound to me. It's something that I could hear a lot more on indie type records. Yeah. Or a layering guitar where I think it is warmer than the Strat and it has a little bit of dirt on it. That leads us to the humbucker. What are you thinking here?
Even thicker than the 2 previous examples in terms of the bottom end and a lot less punch on the top end. It's almost like it lost its vibe at the very top.
Yeah, it's a little bit fuller, a little bit more scooped than the Tele. It works. It's not my favorite application for this. Let's move on to the middle pickups. And as always, starting with the Strat, what you got?
Very woolly in the mid-range and a nice crisp top. That's how I heard that.
I have a little bit of a different ear to that because I put down here where it lacks definition a little bit for me.
It does. That's why I said woolly.
Okay. I used the adjective here that's kind of warm but a little bit muddy to me. So it's got some hair on it, I guess. Right?
Agreement.
What about the Tele?
This felt like a very balanced range for the Tele, and it also showcases a lot more power to the sound of the Tele by comparison.
Yeah. In this application, the middle position really shines here to me.
Yeah.
This is, to me, it's like a very sort of classic rock sound. It's kind of raunchy. It's warm. This was a highlight for me to kind of listen to that in this application. That brings us to, once again, the humbuckers. What are you thinking?
Heavy bottom weight and very balanced above that.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I felt about the humbucker in this particular example.
I think it's lacking a little bit of the mids in this. It starts to lose focus a little bit to me when I'm hearing this one. Let's move on, shall we? So
Neck
let's
pickup,
go
for
with,
example, too.
Strat, Jody, what are you hearing here?
Muddy in the mids, spanky on top.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I'm not hearing the muddiness that you're hearing here. To me, it has a really good definition. To me, this is starting to get into that classic kind of bluesy tone for me, where I hear it's a Strat where it really shines.
Maybe what I mean by the muddy mids then is that it's loose. By comparison,
okay.
It's not tight in there. It's loose.
Right. These are unprocessed tracks. So if you're dealing with any one of these in like a mixed situation, a lot of this could be rectified with EQ and certainly compression and things like that. As we always like to say, let's get it as close as we can from the source, right?
Yes.
What did you think about the Tele here then?
The mids here felt very chocolatey. That was my definition of that.
Is that milk chocolate or dark chocolate?
It's a dark chocolate, dark milk chocolate. Yes, in terms of the mids. And then it was a mellow top end to these.
I hear this one as a little bit more of a filler kind of guitar. I hear this is not the main track in a guitar for me.
That's
like
why chocolate milk happens, man. It's filler.
There you go, right? So this to me is like a little bit slightly muddy. I wouldn't use this as the guitar track in a song. With a lot of these like sort of tele tones, I can kind of hear like a Radiohead kind of a vibe where indie rock type of thing where I think it would really shine. But what about the humbucker then?
Very pokey in the high mids to me, like smacking me in the face, like, ouch, that hurt. Thick bottom and an airy top.
So it's like Big Bottom Girls.
Might almost be like the Three Stooges and somebody trying to poke my eyes out, and then I'm trying to hold my hand up to avoid getting poked.
To avoid that, yeah,
Yes.
Okay. To me, it's similar to the Tele. It's a little bit less muddy than the Tele to me. It doesn't have a lot of definition here. This is not the strength. In a situation like this where we didn't really do any kind of lead lines with any of this, just to kind of showcase, because you can go off on a tangent here, right? That would be maybe something where a humbucker might work here. In this, a little bit meh to me, as you like to say. It's meh. Let's move on to example number 3. Now we're getting a little crunchier. We're back to the Soldano. Obviously, the crunch channel here. Very similar type of setup here as before. The only difference with the first one, it has the Royer 121. There's an added Sennheiser 421 in the IR. And placement, again, very similar. I'm right off the cap with these, just blended a little bit to where I like them.
All right.
Okay, what do we got for the bridge of the Strat, Jody?
To me, it is a very punchy crunch sound with a very searing take off the top of my head sound on the top end.
Yes, I agree. It's obviously super aggressive sounding and cutting through anything. Also, it's a little bit brittle. This is not like the strong suit of a Strat to me, where we're kind of getting up in a little bit more of a higher gain type of stuff. These are examples. You will hear that there is some noise in between the tracks, but these are the ones just as a reminder where there is some noise gating going on here as well. That being said, what do you think of the Tele here?
Much like the Strat, I've got a very punchy crunch with a little bit of extra low mids to help really get it into the gut, and a crisp top.
Here, I'm going back again to like a raunchy type of a sound. It has that definition compared to the last example. This is a little bit more usable, like an upfront kind of a circumstance, where it's like you need that kind of cutting, but it's a shoegazy kind of thing. You're a little bit too cool for school. Humbucker.
Very hot in the high mids and a lot less gut than the other two examples.
This is like the bread and butter of a humbucker pickup. It's a little bit scooped. To me, a humbucker in like a high gain situation really shines here. When we're talking about these as well, like we're doing a little bit more of a classic rock like overall sound, right? When it comes to these, where a lot of this stuff, if you're dealing with anything more high gain, you're always going to deal with a humbucker basically. And I don't think I'm painting with too broad of a stroke to kind of bring that in here. To me, this is kind of like the bread and butter of a humbucking equipped guitar. Let's move on to the middle. Thoughts?
With the Strat, it feels rich, almost muddy in the mids, the top mellowed out, and the bottom fattened up.
To me, this is starting to lose some clarity here. This is not, to me, the strength of a Strat in this situation. Certainly not with this kind of pickup. I would almost argue that that's the case for all of the stuff in the high gain and stuff with the Strat. Yeah, not the strength. What do you think of the Tele?
I felt it was balanced, and it had like a nice crispy coating to it, almost like a Popeye's chicken sandwich.
Are you hungry, man? Because there's a lot of food references here. Again, this is one of my favorite sounds for the Tele in this application. It could be a great supporting guitar, but I also think for like a dirty kind of indie music type of a thing, this could be all up front. So I think that kind of shines here. What did you think about the humbucker?
Very balanced overall with a super accented top.
Yeah?
Yeah. I felt like the top came out like out front of the rest of the balance of it.
Right. To me, I have this sounding like, I think it sounds pretty honky. It's kind of like a very strong, kind of like a mid-rangey type of a thing. Not my favorite for this kind of sound. Again, as I've hearkened to like a Tele in a couple of examples, this might be a really good supporting track. But as a main guitar, this is not my favorite sound for a humbucker equipped guitar.
Right.
Next one, we got the neck, for example, 3 here. Let's take a listen to that. All right, Jody, what do we got? Strat.
For me, with the Strat on this particular one, super punch. And it has a nice accented low and a nice accented high. This felt like the best example of the Strat for me.
I'm with you right there. It's that and metal neck for the clean stuff that really does it for me. This is a classic kind of blues type of a sound, possibly with a little bit less crunch than in this example. This is a great one to have there. What did you think of the Tele in this application?
Fat. Just felt fat with a crispy coating.
Yeah. I just put down one phrase here, just mud fest. It was like to me that there's very few redeemable qualities for this in this application with me for the Tele. And that leads us to the humbucker.
The high end has a good punch, and it felt really tight.
It's this warm type of a sound. It's kind of hairy, where it's not like super defined to me. It's a big woolly walking carpet kind of a thing. So
okay, Chewbacca.
Exactly. So if you want to put some Chewbacca in your track, you high gain neck pickup on a humbucker guitar. Hopefully those examples will act as some sort of guide what to kind of listen for, and the strengths are there. Obviously, with all of these, we've taken a relatively scientific approach and have everything being as equal as possible. That's not how we dial in sound generally.
No, you do it more by feel and touch and all that other kind of fun stuff. But this is an interesting way to look at all of it.
Right. I think it just kind of highlights the differences where you plug in a guitar and you start turning knobs to accommodate for that sound. In my opinion, it can be a little bit of a blueprint, sort of like when you're listening to stuff. So like moving forward, I'm imagining this kind of sound. Okay, we're going to use a crunchy amp with the Tele in the middle position, whatever it happens to be. So hopefully that will highlight some of the differences, especially for you guys that are not guitar players.
We're going to move on to our Friday finds. Chris, what have you got this week?
I actually have a twofer that I want to bring up. One is crucial. They generally do memories, right? And drives and things like that. They have a 2 terabyte SSD drive for $160.
Egads, that's a good price.
That's what I thought. So I thought, okay, well, at least at the time of taping of this, right? That's the price of it. I was like, wow, that's actually really good. What's wrong with it, kind of thing. So I don't know that there is slow. Anything. Well, still, it's like a 2 terabyte drive SSD, right? So that has to be the other one. Now, the bonus one I have is I just heard the new Judas Priest single.
Oh, boy.
And there's still some powder kegging going on in the old man right there, because the new track that came out is really, really cool. Halford still has the pipes, at least in the studio. He certainly does. I'll throw that in. If you're like a metalhead like me, go check out the new Judas Priest track. It's called Panic Attack. What do you got?
I'm going with a synth called Current, which is by Minimal Audio. And Minimal Audio has recently walked back their concept of saying this is only available for a subscription plan, mainly because a lot of users.
We're seeing a trend now?
Yeah, aren't we? Maybe.
Yeah.
That'd be nice. People were upset about it because some of the functionality that they want in Current, which is their synth, isn't necessary for the subscription plan. They just wanted to own the damn thing. There's obviously a whole lot of bells and whistles of samples and other things that they add into the subscription, but there were users that are like, I don't want to pay for all that because I don't use all that.
Right.
So they walked it back. If you are a fan of Minimal Audio and you like their Current synth, you can now get it again without that subscription plan. Yeehaw!
Well, good on them. Good on them.
While we've got your attention, we ask that you go to InsideTheRecordingStudio.com and sign up for our mailing list. You'll need to be on our email list in order to be eligible for future giveaways, and we'll make sure you don't miss any future episodes of this incredible podcast. Send us an email at goldstar, GOLDSTAR, at InsideTheRecordingStudio.com with the word guitars, and you'll get something cool back in your inbox. If you have a topic or suggestion for Chris and I to explain in a future episode, contact us at the contact page, and we'll put it into consideration for a future episode. With that, I'll say see you next week.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good one, Jody.